Welcome to a new video from TMS Software. Today we are going to have a look how to build web services for databases with FireDAC and XData. The database that we're going to use is accessible with FireDAC, and the query results need to be provided as a web service. You want to build a web application, an API, or something else, but you can't use direct access using FireDAC because you want to use another platform of some sort. You also do not have the time for a big learning curve. You don't want to use any object relational mapping, and the only query language you want to use is SQL because you've known it for years. In this video, I'm going to present one possible solution. We're going to use TMS XData to create the web service, and we're going to use FireDAC for all the database access. The web service is going to return JSON, meaning this JSON can be very specific for FireDAC or customized. If the other application is going to be built with FireDAC, it's quite useful if you use FireDAC specific methods to create the JSON file or the JSON stream. Otherwise, you can customize your JSON in many ways. I'm going to show both alternatives in this video. Before we are going to start building the server and the corresponding application, I would like to explain why XData, why TMS XData. It completely abstracts from server programming. You have a main form and you have a data module that you drop design time components on and nothing else. You don't need to care about server paths and all that kind of stuff. XData does everything for you. It also provides REST data access to all the resources that you define. These resources can either be services with custom methods or classes with properties that are automatically serialized. And of course, you can also use the power of TMS Aurelius to hook up databases, deliver it into the object relational mapper, and then you have data access right away. However, there is a little bit of a learning curve for this special query language, and you might not want to be familiar with Aurelius, so you can even skip that. XData is flexible because the language that you can use is Delphi. It uses Delphi classes, it integrates into the RTL, and it also integrates nicely into FireDAC. And for a couple of versions in Delphi, we know about FireDAC. You're going to be fast. Just do what you did before, just include XData in it, but you don't need to do anything special in order to use XData. Finally, XData is very compact, meaning you deploy exactly one file. This can't be said for other solutions that are out there. Sometimes you need to do specific stuff to the service that you want to use the REST services on. With XData, it's simple. You get one executable and you either deploy it to your Windows service, and there's also a video how to build a Linux solution or a Linux server with XData. Again, I'm going to start completely from scratch. So File, New, Other, TMS XData. We want to create a VCL server. We don't want to use a service or build a service right now. We want to build a server. And this server has a main form, which is going to be created for us, which you see right here being created. And it's also going to have one additional unit with the data module. I kept the video a little bit. I saved the whole project. I created the project XData database, and I saved the main form as main form and the server container as server container. The first step is to get rid of the defaults for Aurelius. So we delete the connection pool and the Aurelius connection. And we need to set up the server endpoint for our server. We're going to pick port 80 and Flix as my address. So my server would be already to go. It would be working right now. It just wouldn't contain any data. So here you see the running server. If I type localhost Flix, you see there is nothing in there. And even if I start the model, nothing is in there. No entities, no types, and no controllers, meaning no services. So this is the empty server. It's working just fine. So how do we get the database connection in there? So create another data module. In Delphi, it should be under the database data module, and call it DB controller. That's the name I always pick, and I save it as UDB controller. And in this DB controller, we're going to place our FD connection and of course our FD query. And also drop a JSON link because that is our file format that we are going to use as a return value for the service. FireDAC needs to know how to build that, and that's how it works. This component adds the units to the data module that you need. You also need to add some links for the database that you're going to use. I want to use a Microsoft SQL database, so I'm going to add the MS SQL driver link. At this point, we already have everything that we need in order to provide our web service with a result set from a query in the FireDAC form. However, since Delphi Rio, FireDAC offers another set of components for even better flexibility when it comes to JSON. So far, all the components give you some kind of customization for the JSON. You can go to your connection, for example, and there you find, if I pull this up, a option which is called resource options and store items. And there you see all the items that are going to be put in your JSON output. For example, right now we would have the meta information, meaning the field attributes. We want those. We want the data, but we don't want the delta. Delta means if you have, for example, a memory table in FireDAC, FDMem table, the changes that you made before writing them back to the underlying SQL database would be available as well. Furthermore, FireDAC has a wonderful option called Store Pretty Print, meaning the JSON is nicely formatted. We don't need this for a web service. We want a result that is efficient and short, or shorter than the pretty print. So we don't check this, especially if we use a browser plugin to look at the output from the web service. We don't need this because the browser plugin is formatting everything nicely for us. The other option that we have in Delphi Rio is using the batch components. So the batch components are usually used if you want to migrate data from one database to another, or if you want to import text data into your database. So what we need is the TFD batch move. We need the JSON writer, and we need the dataset reader. So the JSON writer gives us the option to write JSON more efficiently, and the performance supposedly, this is what the documentation from FireDAC says, is supposedly better. So here you can also set data definitions, customize the JSON more than you can do it using the standard method of the query, which I'm going to show you first. So here you can also select the JSON format, BASIN, JSON, or JSONP. We stay with standard JSON. And of course you can specify the file name and stuff like that. We don't need a file name, we return everything through a stream. To set this up, the batch move needs the dataset reader and it needs the writer. The dataset reader needs to be connected to the dataset, which is going to be our query. And the JSON writer doesn't need any further customization during design time. What else do we need? Of course, the query right now, we just have to make sure that it's connected to the connection, which it is. Let me rename the connection to connection. And let's name the query wonderful names. And we already set the data module to DB controller. The batch move we call batch, and the reader we call reader or batch reader, and the writer we call batch writer, capital B. Perfect. We need to set up the connection next. So for this, I'm going to use one of my standard databases that I always use for demos. So I don't use a connection definition, driver ID, and this is really strange. If you tip one letter, it already gets completed the first time. So I want Microsoft SQL, which is MS SQL, and my server and all that stuff. I'm going to specify it. So I set up my connection. Database is Lee County. This is my local desktop, and I use operating system authentication instead of username and password. Okay. Next, you need to set the login prompt to false. Otherwise, you'll have some nasty surprise when you try accessing your server. And that's it. The query, of course, needs to be specified as well. I'm going to say select star from schools, for example, execute. And you see I get all my data during design time. Let's make sure the connection is closed again. And that's that. Now it's really a principle how you design everything. I always design everything in the DB controller that has to do with the database, and everything that has to do with the service or with my web service I define in the service that we want to use. So let me just say file, new, other, TMS XData. We create a new service because we're not going to use any entities from the database using Aurelius. We're going to create our own service inside of our XData server. And this service we are going to call school service. And we're not needing sample methods. And I also don't want the interface and implementation in separate files. I want it to be easy, so same file, finish, and we get a file called school service with the interface and the implementation. So as we defined in, I have to save this, name it use school service. As we decided in our DB controller, the query is going to return all the schools. And this is something I did intentionally. Make sure if you quit this dialog that you click OK. I don't know why this happens to me. If I double click it, I use it at design time. I often click escape on the keyboard to make it disappear. So make sure you confirm with OK so the query is in there. That can lead to nasty errors. You look on for hours and you can't find it, and then it's something simple as that. The query isn't there. Okay, so we built in this data module a public method, a function, and I call this function get schools. We won't have any parameters, and I want to return a stream, and I'm not going to return the stream as a function value. No, I'm going to make the calling method reserve the memory and everything, so I don't need to reserve or free the memory for the stream that I'm going to use. Instead, XData is going to take care of that, and XData is only going to take care of that, this is how I remember it, if I reserve the memory inside of my service method. So here I'm going to pass a stream of data type tstream, and that's it, and that is going to take the data from the query. And of course, then it's not a function anymore, then it becomes a procedure because we don't have a return value. I use autocomplete, and this is the very simple approach. We make sure that our query is open, so we open the query.open, and the next call is query save to stream. Why Delphi Rio aligns this like this, I have no idea. Save to stream, and the stream is of course a stream. And the format, this is key, sfjson, we force the JSON format. We could also use sfxml, auto, or binary, but in this case JSON. Very important, as this is inside of the database controller. If assigned a stream, we do this, otherwise we leave everything as this. We could also, of course, in a professional application, we would generate an exception of some sort. We just leave it like this. So this is all you need to generate JSON for a database query. So how do we get it to the service? Easy. We go to our school service. First, we have a look at the interface. We need to define a service method to return the data, and that is done by defining a function in the interface. I name it getSchools, and the return value here is a stream. That means XData is not going to do anything with the information. XData is not going to serialize this object. The object is being transferred as is. So we will make sure that this tstream contains JSON information. And of course, this is an HTTP GET method. We don't have any parameters either. So get schools will be an HTTP GET method, and it returns a tstream. We transfer this to the implementation. We implement it, and then we need to define the local variable lResult, and that is of tMemoryStream, and lResult equals tMemoryStream dot create. And now we can call the DB controller method. The DB controller is always there because Delphi, just like in a VCL application, and the XData server technically is nothing else but a VCL application. If you go to project options and have a look at the forms, you see that the DB controller is a data module which is auto-created. Of course, you could do this manually if you wanted, but why? So we can call DB controller dot get schools, and as a parameter we pass our memory stream. That's it. Do not free lResult. XData is gonna take care of that for you. Okay, so this is all you need to do. Well, one final thing is missing, of course. If I was sitting in front of you doing a presentation, you would have said, why don't you assign the result? Of course, result equals lResult, but still we do not need to free lResult. We have one thing missing, because if we compile this, the compiler is not able to resolve tstream. You need to add classes or system.classes to the users clause, and this compiles fine. If we start the server and open our web service now, the value and all that stuff is still the same, but the model should definitely look different now. Yes, it does. So we have the school service with the action get schools. It's a get method, and that means for us, we can use after our root localhost flicks, we can use school service / get schools. And guess what? Here's our result from the database. So at first we have the FireDAC code, the version. Then we have, what is it? It's a table, it's query. Then it also gives us the name of the original data table or query after the from. And all this is meta information about the fields inside of the database. And if you scroll down more, at some point right here, you get to the row list, and here you see all the information out of the database. This means you, at this point, you have a web service that allows you to build data backends for any application, meaning mobile applications, web applications, multi-platform applications. You're flexible. What you had to do to sum this up, I know you could reverse, but sometimes it's better. What we did, let me repeat it. We created a new XData server. We added a database controller. The database controller has a connection, a query, and all the driver stuff that you need, meaning the SQL driver in this case, the file format link, which is JSON, and we didn't even touch this below here. This is just an alternative. Then you implement a method where you open the query and save the query to a stream. The stream is the parameter of the method, and the method itself is called from the service. The service is defined by you again. We named the method get schools. It returns a stream, and it does nothing but create a memory stream, call the DB controller method get schools, and that's it. So you see, XData is just easy and quick because you can use what you've always known. You don't need to learn anything new. You can rely on FireDAC, and you can rely on wizards in the IDE, and you can rely on classes, interfaces, and the implementation of that interface. And you still use RTL classes that are being returned, and the streaming, the JSON, the endpoints, all that kind of stuff. It's all abstracted from. You don't need to care about any of that. So let's implement the very same thing with the batch move components. We go to our database controller and call this procedure get schools batch. Again, we're going to pass in a stream. That's not going to change. And I mean, this is why I implemented it this way. Your service is not going to change. The only thing is going to change. The only thing that is going to change is the implementation inside of your database controller. So, whoopsie, what did I do wrong? Oh, here, procedure, I spelled it wrong. Okay, so again, if assigned a stream, then begin. So we don't even need to open the query because the query is linked to the batch move. So we can focus on using batch move, and the query is being opened and the data is being written to wherever we specify. And this is exactly the key. We need to specify for the batch writer where to write it. So we set batch writer stream, and that is a stream. And then we can call batch dot execute. That's it. This will make sure that the data is being written to a stream and batch.execute. Let's go back into our service. We're no longer going to use db controller get schools. Instead, we're going to use get schools batch. We have to make sure that we shut down the server, recompile, and start the server, switch to the browser again. And then we call exactly the same method. I'm going to open a new window. I'm going to close the old window. Localhost flicks, school service, and get schools. Guess what? The output is exactly the same. Oh no, it's not. It's actually it's completely different because we don't have any meta information and we don't have any FireDAC specific information. So this is ideal if you do not want to work with FireDAC on the client side. So this is better for general APIs and other stuff because this way you do not tie the client to FireDAC that much. Of course, you could use the FireDAC output to parse the FireDAC output, but this is much more handy. This is just the data focusing on the important stuff. So let us switch back to the FireDAC variant by removing the batch, by closing the server, compile, and let's build a client. So file, new, nope, this is always the wrong way, I always mess it up. Add new project, and I want to add a Delphi project, and it's supposed to be a Windows VCL application, perfect. And let me save this all. Okay, after saving, I have the main form. Let me also name it main form main, and make it a little bit bigger. And the only thing we need at first is a grid, TDB grid. Set it to AL client. And this is shown in another video I did, so I might speed a little bit if you think it's too fast. So at this point we have two options. The one option is we do not have an XData license and we want to consume this web service without using any XData specific stuff. I showed this in one of my last videos with the Embarcadero REST API that comes with Delphi Rio. At this point, however, I'm going to show you how quick you can do it with XData. Compared to writing a web application, we do not have any non-visual components for developing this kind of stuff. We just do it in code because it doesn't make any sense to drop a component on the form. So what we need to do is, and this might be a little bit odd at first, you need to add the interface of your service to your application. And of course, I made it easy for myself, putting the implementation and the interface in the same file. It's not going to matter for me here, but let's say you wanted to give your XData API to a customer that wants to develop against your API. You would only give them the interface, of course, it wouldn't give them the implementation of your interface. So with all that said, we basically add both the interface and the implementation by adding the file. However, usually you only need to add the interface. So we need to add uSchool service to this product. So we click add, and then we select the file. That's it. And we, of course, have to use it in order to be able to use it. So in the implementation, we add 2 units. One is XData client. That is where the functionality comes from. And of course, we need to add our interface, which is uSchool service. At this point, do a test compile. And why did I do this test compile? Well, sometimes you teach things best by simply showing that it doesn't work. People say, well, putting the interface and the implementation in the same file doesn't hurt you. Here you see it does, because you're simply unable to include it, because if I wanted to include my service in my client application, I now would also need to include the database controller, which I don't want to do. So I go back to my school service and I will put the implementation in a different file. So I cut away from this cleanup, of course. So at the end of this, we have the school service with the interface and the method, nothing else in there, no implementation. And in the second file that I just created, uSchool service implementation, I have the type for the implementation, the class, and I added the users clause, of course, including the interface. And here we have the implementation of the service and the registration of the types. And changing back now to the XData client again, and now doing the test compile, it works. Because now the interface doesn't have any other links to anything else, just the interface. Just to rephrase this, separating the implementation from the interface might seem academic at first, and I've been criticized quite often for being too academic when I write code, but I think this is a wonderful example that interface and implementation, when it comes to web services, should never reside in the same file. Even if somebody tells you, like I did at the beginning of the video, oh, we're just gonna make it easy and this is just for a demo. But at some point, it's gonna bite you. And don't do it at all. Just do it right from the start. Separate interface and implementation. So going back, we need to implement the loading of the data, so to speak. We need to access our client and we need the data. So how are we going to do this? Of course, we need a hook first, which is the form on show event. When the form is shown, I want to do something, load data, and load data is a private method, procedure, procedure, load data, and load data. What is load data going to do? We included the XData client and our school service. And the client is a local variable, a client, and the data type is TXData client. And the service, now it gets interesting. We have our service, and of what type is that? Well, of course, of the interface type. If you're uncertain, go into your interface. iSchool service is the data type. So your service is iSchool service. So why do we type this? Well, you already noticed something. We can work with types. We're not working with strings. We're not working with some abstract concept. We're actually working with an interface that we defined in Delphi, even though we're accessing web service. So let me write a few more lines of code and it becomes very clear why XData is so brilliant in this case. TXData client. Let me make it nice. Okay. Create. We simply create a client instance. And this, of course, is a hard-coded string here for me in the demo. Might be for you as well. So we need to point to the root of the web service, which is localhost port 80 flicks for me. And then we have to assign L service, the service variable. And we get that through the client, client.service. And service T, what is the T? Well, it's a generic class. So at this point, we can specify iSchool service. And now the magic begins. So we can call L service, which is our service, right? We can type dot. Guess what? Look, we get schools. Isn't that amazing? So we're calling a web service and we can use it like a normal Delphi object, Delphi class. Even though the data comes from the internet and it's open, it's something anybody else could use without XData, but still we can use XData and we can use a method like getSchools and we have a stream. So how do we assign this? Well, looking at the fingerprint, that means we need a stream. So we define a stream, L stream. And of course, I can't use the abstract class. I need some kind of stream. I'm going to use a memory stream. I'm going to create it, tmemory stream.create. And in this case, we need to free it. So here we have lstream.free. And we are going to assign it lstream equals, and here we need to typecast stmemory stream. And now here we need to load the data into something. So far we just have a form and a grid. So I suggest we use a FireDAC mem table, and that of course needs the JSON link again. But no database, right? There's no database involved. There's no more Microsoft SQL. Nope, it's just JSON. So there's no database driver dependency of any sort. We're just depending on the web service. And finally, of course, we need a data source to connect the grid. That means the data set is the FDMEM table 1, and the grid has the data source 1. That's it. So the final step missing is that we load the stream. So lstream position 0, and we load it into the mem table, which I'm going to rename into table. And then on the table, we have the method table load from stream, lstream, and we need a format. And I tried this before, SF auto is not going to work. You need to specify the format. So in this case, SF JSON. This should work. Let's run this. Be aware, your server needs to be running in the background, of course. So run this, and voila. That's how easy it is to consume an XData web service with Delphi. I mean, this is create the client, set the URL, assign your service. The service is fully typed because of the interface. If you had more methods with parameters and everything, you would have full type safety on a web service at compile time, not at runtime, at compile time. And then you get the data just with the same data type that you're used to from Delphi, calling the method, getting the data as a stream, you set the position to 0, load it, and then you can fully rely on FireDAC again. Because our result set is a FireDAC data table formatted as JSON, so we can load it, but you keep it open for other frameworks. If you know that you're never going to use FireDAC, you can use the batch move component with a more general approach. And of course, another thing that you can do is you can write your own JSON or your own output format. You can even write your proprietary output format that you load on your client. However, XData is always going to support you because you have the service interface and the methods to retrieve the data. Finishing this video tutorial, again, look at what I said in the beginning. Why XData? You had nothing to do with server programming. You had full REST data access to your database. No database on the client. It was only JSON. And you have only been programming with Delphi using the FireDAC framework. It is fully flexible and integrated into these existing frameworks. It is fast. You were able to follow me right away because you saw that I used classes, interfaces. I didn't do anything new really. I used design time components on a data module. You've done this hundreds of times. There was nothing more. And even to retrieve the data from your database, you use SQL, also something that you've been using for years. And it's quite compact. And this is the last thing I have to show you. There is only one file, and that's what I'm going to show you right now. So this is the database project, and if I go into Win32 debug, it's just this exe, and boom, the server is running. I close it, the server is stopped. So everything is included in this one file, all the database connectivity, all your service methods. The only thing you need to deploy is this file. No .NET framework, no dependencies of any other big libraries. Everything is in that exe like you're used from Delphi. The only thing that I'm going to accept right now, which makes it a little bit more complicated, is deploying to Linux, because then you need to deploy to a Linux application. However, there's a blog post about that from the principal architect of XData on the TMS blog, and even that is possible. So this concludes the video tutorial how to build web services for databases with FireDAC and XData.